We're at our upset meter. We feature four
Uh-oh.
teams every week. Here are the rules. Four teams every week. The spread has to be greater than 10 points. We pick four teams. CD and I talk about it beforehand. And we give our thoughts, right? Is this a cold upset? Is this just not going to happen? Is it mild? Is it like this should not happen, but if it does, that would be pretty crazy. Sweating is like, okay, like if this happens, it's crazy, but it's like, okay, now hindsight, yeah, maybe if we looked at that game a little bit better. Steaming is like, okay, this could very much happen. Piping is like, how is this a 10-point line? Right. So we're looking at Michigan. They're traveling on the
They
road.
are traveling, baby.
They're traveling to the Gophers. What time is that game at? Central time?
I believe it's a 6 o'clock, 6:30 game on NBC.
6:30 on NBC. A little prime time. Prime time. So yeah, this line, I believe it's at 19. I'm gonna pull it up right now. While I'm pulling that up, we can talk about Michigan played really good football last week against Nebraska. I think they've literally just played with their food up until this point. They got into Big Ten play and said, okay, we're not gonna play with our food. JJ McCarthy's looking like one of the better quarterbacks in the country. For me, this is cold. These are two teams trending in opposite directions right now.
In terms of trending, I would say as an unbiased Minnesota fan, like we all are, I do think they played their best half of football. And whatever that means for you this past half, where they played really, really well against, albeit Louisiana, but that's still, Louisiana's not a bad football team. And regardless, playing good football is playing good football, right? That's important. I do think Michigan is just way too talented, all levels of the football, quarterback, O-line, running backs, wide receivers. Their defense is loaded. Yes, they're going to Minnesota, and I'll say Minnesota is one of the more underrated environments. I do think they really get up for big games,
Huntington
especially
Bank, baby.
a night game goes really, really hard in there. But there's a reason why it's a 90-point spread. I don't have too much faith in our Gophers. I do think Michigan's just that good, and I do think Ethan Kaliakmanis sometimes tries to do too much. Right, he's still a young quarterback learning how to play the position. Where has Brevin Spanford been all year? Kind of non-existent. Maybe he breaks out, maybe he doesn't. But JJ, Blake Corum, hopefully Donovan Edwards gets going a little bit. He's kind of been a disappointment so far, and I think this goal for defense has been vulnerable the past 3 weeks. Really vulnerable. Super impressed with what Michigan did. Went into Nebraska, which is not an easy place to play. Silenced the crowd real quick and just dominated them. And I think they do that the same here
Dude, I
with
mean,
Minnesota,
fans were leaving in the second quarter. It was crazy.
which at Nebraska does not happen. That is crazy.
I think halftime is kind of that bar that like I think people it's always a sellout, right? There's gonna be people there at kickoff. I think halftime gets out of hand, right? There's a lot of good tailgating out there in Lincoln, so I think people go out there and tailgate watch the game. But second quarter though, that before halftime, that's impressive. Before halftime, that's you know something's up when that's going on there. So that line's 19, 19 and a half, 20. If you're better, make sure you shop those lines. Make sure you get the best one there. So I'm put them in. I'm gonna put them in cold for sure.
Mhm.
Next up, USC Trojans. They get a home game. Why are they on the upset meter though? They're playing Arizona. USC has not been playing good football defensively. Gosh, if you thought I was about to slander Caleb Williams, you're absolutely out of your mind.
As a
Especially as a
former
Bears,
Chicago Bear, we cannot say that.
as a Chicago Bear,
Future
as a Chicago
Chicago
Bears
Bear.
fan, cannot be slandering Caleb Williams at this point because who knows? Who knows? But this line's at 21 and a half. That's a big spread, dude. But this defense, like this USC defense stinks. And you know what? I know Jaden Delore isn't playing, which maybe your upside, your ceiling isn't there. But at the same time, dude, like just not turning the ball over, just not turning the ball over is a big deal. And that's what Jaden Delore loves to do. I mean, every morning it's a bowl of Cheerios and an interception. I mean, that's what it is for him. Every morning. That's what he has for breakfast. So I think this one's not quite steaming, but it might be like it could be a sweaty game for USC. It might be a little bit more than sweating for me.
I think it's right in between there if we had a term for it. I do think in terms of covering the line, I think Fafita is honestly better for you. If you're a better, you probably love that happening, which maybe we'll find out later in the show. Stick around for Dawson's Diner. But
Stick around.
I do think Jaden DeLora does give you that upside to actually pull off a win, in what we kind of forget about sometimes, like in college football, that's kind of what matters. Is winning the football game, and getting upset isn't about covering the spread. It's about winning the football game. But I do think their defense is vulnerable. We talked about it. I think maybe that offense is frustrated having to go out and score a ton of points all the time. And who knows with that locker room dynamic there. I'm not saying anything. I just been on football teams, like that can be frustrating, right? They're human beings, they're college students. And Arizona has talent on the offense side of the football. We saw what they did to Washington and played a really close game against them. But it's nice for USC to come home. That's why I'm not quite in the steaming piping, range, upper echelon upset meter. But it's definitely something to monitor. Where I think in the second half there, you can see a close football game, and you might have to turn on TV right away, because of what can happen there and how vulnerable that defense can be at times.
Absolutely. I'm gonna throw that one right there in between
Yeah.
Sweat and Steeman. Next up, Kansas State. They're playing Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has not played good football this year. Who's playing quarterback?
That's an understatement. That's an understatement. They have played just bad football.
They've played bad. Football. They just lost to Iowa State, but
they had a bye week.
They had a bye week, and weird things happen in Stillwater. And right when you think you have Mike Gundy in the corner, it's exactly the moment he puts you in an absolute full Nelson. So, I personally don't think, because of the way Oklahoma State's been playing football, right? I think to have an upset, to be higher on the meter, the underdog team needs to be playing good football.
Yeah.
And they get the credit for being at home in this game. I don't think it's quite sweating. I don't think it's quite sweating, but it could be. You can make an argument, I think, that it could be sweating, right? And who knows? In the fourth quarter, this could be a one possession game. But to me, like, if this happened, it would be pretty crazy to me. It'd be a pretty crazy upset for me, for sure.
Yeah, I think this is more about the amount of respect we have for Mike Gundy, and what we've seen and what we've learned not to do is to not put Mike Gundy in the corner and then bet against him. That's just 8 times out of 10, that's gonna not work out in your favor. But Kansas State's also coming off a bye, right? Where they had the disappointing loss to Missouri, bounced back with a nice winning against UCF, and now they look to really make a statement going into the back half of their schedule, starting in October here. And I think we're both pretty still high on Kansas State, which is not why I'm sweating, or I'm quite like steam and sweating area, but I do think it's going to be something to monitor, right? Stillwater, Oklahoma is not easy to play. Like you mentioned, you hit it all on the nail there. I completely agree.
Yeah, that one for me is sitting in mild, not quite sweating. Last game that we'll talk about today in the upset meters, Miami. Miami hosts Georgia Tech. It's a 21-point spread right there. That's a pretty big spread. And Georgia Tech has played some good football this year at times, for sure. Now, they are coming off an absolutely brutal loss to none other than Christopher's favorite team, Bowling Stinking Green.
The Power 5 Killers.
The Power 5 Killers. Crucidi is a Gophers fan if you're just tuning in for the first time. So he knows a little something about Bowling Green. And in the same way that I know a little bit about
double-digit
State.
Loss, though. Double-digit loss.
And they were up. And they were up
blowing
big.
a lead. That is... Now, the thing is, in college football, right, one or two things can happen, right? Maybe three, right? Where nothing really happens and you just kind of just go out your season, where you get demoralized and it's train off the rails. In a first-year head coach, you don't quite know, because how much buy-in does he have in this locker room, right? You'd think he'd have a lot because his job security is probably pretty high, right? Or you get a team that's just pissed off and starts playing really, really good football. But also, Miami's playing really good football right now. And it doesn't almost matter how good Georgia Tech plays. I think Miami's just a really good football team right now. There's reason they're in the top 20. There's reason they're 4-0, and they've been really, really impressive in all four of those games. I get it. Miami, Ohio is not great. Bethune-Cookman, right? Enough said. And Temple is terrible, terrible. But I think it's A&M. They dominated them. I thought was maybe not dominated, but they really, really impressed. And they won
Second
by
half they did.
15 points.
In the second half they did.
Exactly. And I think that says a lot about that team and Mario Cristobal and the culture they have there going down in Miami. And again, it's at home, right? That's a big deal. Not
Yeah,
having to go to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, just not playing at Bobby Dodd is a big
Mhm.
deal. So I'm this to me is not even mild. I don't think. I think Miami is a team that people are not talking about enough as a potential playoff contender. It's hard to say when a team's barely 4-0, but their offensive line is elite. Their defensive line is playing well. They have two coordinators that are absolute hits for hires. Tyler Van Dyke is playing at an insanely high level. Their secondary looks good. I just don't see it, man. I don't see it. Are you in the boat with me? Not even mild is where I'm gonna go with
Yeah,
this.
it frustrates me to say this as a Georgia Tech over better. I did have them. That Bowling Green killed me, but yeah, I think Miami's playing too good football right now. Hayes King is fine, but he's not going to do enough to win this football game and to really make him sweat.
I agree. Let's go stick them right there.